So without further ado, please give a warm welcome to our first guest of this year, David Orr and Heather Arbiter from Arkadium.
Hey everyone. All right. This is our topic, casual games and how do we make them? So, I'm David Orr. I'm a senior game developer at Arkadium. And this is Heather Arbiter. She's a game designer at Arkadium. If you've never heard of Arkadium before, I'll tell you a little bit about us. We're a casual games company founded in 2001. We're in New York City, next to the Flatiron District. And for many years, the backbone of our company was making web portals. So if you ever go to CNN.com or LATimes.com, Washington Post, AARP, and many others, if you go to their game sections, all those games are made by Arkadium. So these are some of our clients. I'm sure some of them are familiar to you. So on the other side of the business, we also make games for Microsoft, for Windows 8 particularly. So these are some of the games we made for them. There's Microsoft Minesweeper, Tap Tiles, Solitaire, Mahjong, Sudoku, and also Jackpot. So these games come with your Windows 8 machine, so you probably have played them too. And also on our last side of the business, we also make original games. So here are some of our games that we have on iOS and Android. These games are not classic games that you are familiar with, but these are games that come from our own developer minds. And that's a little bit about Arkadium. And now, I'm going to pass it over to Heather and awkwardly stand there.
Please don't awkwardly stand there the whole time. Hi, I'm Heather, obviously. It'd be weird if I was somebody else. So David and I were asked to do a talk, and as people who've been working in the games industry for a little while, we thought, well, what can we do a talk about? And we decided, let's talk about casual games. That's what we make. I myself, I grew up playing casual games. I love casual games. I'm doing exactly what I want to be doing. So they're very interesting. So I thought we'd start by defining what's a casual game. So we looked at each other, we talked about it for a little while, and we're like, well, what's the actual definition? And if you Google it, you'll see a lot of different definitions from a lot of different people. So there was a little bit of an issue deciding what's a casual game because it doesn't have a very clear definition. And the reason for that is because casual means more than one thing. It means either a casual player, which is where you usually hear the term, or a casual game, which is which is the term we're coming up with, and we're seeking to define a little better. So a casual player has their time and interest in the game is limited. It's low investment for them, and it can be for any game. You can have a hardcore game that's played casually. If somebody plays like Call of Duty once a month, they're playing a hardcore game casually. On the other hand, a casual game doesn't require time and investment. They tend to have simple systems, but it can also be played in a hardcore way. If you play Candy Crush for 2 hours a night, you're playing a casual game hardcore. So how we define it is based on two specific areas. One is the mechanics and depth of the game, so the story, what it's about, the systems and the mechanics in it, and the general amount of content it has. So a really good example of a game that has a lot of that is something like Final Fantasy VII. RPGs tend to be big in these areas. Then there's execution, which is usually kind of part of skill level, but it also is attached to the type of skill it is, such as pattern recognition, which is a skill, but is not usually, it's considered one of the most casual skills. And those are games like Bejeweled and Farmville. So when it comes to things like execution, there's like a barrier for it. On one hand, you have a first-person shooter, which systems-wise is fairly simple. You run around in a 3D world, there's hand-eye coordination, you're pointing and shooting. And there may be some depth in the content, like different kinds of guns or the story or the levels, but the basic core mechanics of running around and shooting things are pretty simple. On the other hand, you have something like Match 3, which is also fairly simple and is definitely a casual game, but its skill type is pattern recognition. And one of the big differences between them is this is the kind of skill it is, and also just how much, concentration in that area it requires. Specifically, 3D games and that require you to navigate in a 3D world tend to be considered higher execution for a variety of reasons. Although we all move around in a 3D environment by our regular lives, doing it in a virtual world requires control of an avatar and using a camera. And also there tends to be a difference between men and women and how effectively they're able to do it, just because of the differences the two genders navigate. In virtual environments, women tend to not navigate as well, which is probably one of the reasons that people perceive it as being less common for girls to play. And there are studies that show that. So what we did was we mapped a bunch of different genres onto this grid, where on one side you have easy to execute, and the mouse does not show. One side you have easy to execute, and the other side you have difficult to execute. And then up and down you have the complexity of the systems. So over in the upper left are more twitchy kind of reflex-heavy games, rhythm games, shooters, platformers, fighting games all the way over to the side. So those are like fast-paced games. In the lower left, you see more things like RTSs and RPGs, which require mastery of complicated systems. RPGs are a little easier to execute technically, but require an understanding of those systems. On the other side, you have MOBAs, which are both complicated and speedy. On the lower right, there are simulation games, city builders, physics games. So that tends to fill in that quadrant. And the upper right is where we have our casual games, things that are simple systems and easier to execute. Hidden object games, infinite runners, like Temple Run. Pac-Man and Tetris are over there. Farmville's over there. Clicker games like Cookie Clicker. And match 3 games like Candy Crush and Bejeweled. There's a little exception when it comes to saga games, which are things like Candy Crush, Cookie Jam, Jelly Splash, that have a lot of levels in it because they actually do a lot of content, and so their complexity increases over time. And that's in depth of the game, but because each individual level fits into the casual spectrum. And we'll talk a little bit about how that breaking up into levels fits in design in a bit. So now we have a definition. And now I wanted to talk a little bit about some common misconceptions in games. So the first one is that they don't require skill. And the other is that only girls and only old people are playing casual games. And then there's that, nobody plays console games, plays casual games or hardcore games. None of these is especially true. And they're being challenged a lot by core gamers usually hold some of these perceptions. So the first one is that games don't require skill, and I usually tell people to just watch someone who's really good at a casual game play it. Our CEO, Jess Ravello, plays Ms. Pac-Man like a boss. It's kind of ridiculous. So, but we consider this like more of a high skill game, but I still put it on the casual spectrum. So how does that work? So casual games take skill, but how does this fall in the execution scale? And that has something to do with entry barrier. It has to do with the starting levels of a game. So games like Ms. Pac-Man and Tetris, which are usually agreed upon to be casual games, still have this high skill area where you see people who are like really good at Tetris and you're like, whoa, how are you doing that? Because it's about the entry level. So the basic gameplay is easy. When you first pick up one of these games, it's pretty easy to get the hang of. You kind of understand it, you don't feel overwhelmed. And then as you progress in the game, then you get to these levels where you're going, ah. Then on the other hand, you have games that are, when you also can be simple, but they, playing it all requires skill. And generally it's you pick it up, and if you've never played the game before, it's like, I feel like I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm just hitting buttons. Stuff is happening. And it's a bit subjective, but it's basically the feeling, you feel the absence of a skill level when you start to play. And that, again, can be fairly subjective, but it usually helps fit into our definitions. And it also contributes to something that makes casual games very recognizable, and that's this low entry barrier makes them feel accessible. And accessibility is a really important part of casual games. Another misconception is that core gamers aren't playing casual games and only girls and old people are playing casual games. And I did not make this for the presentation. If you Google search the term casual gamer, this is the second result. So there is definitely a little bit of stigma towards people who play casual games. I'm very good at Googling, thank you very much. So this is a graph of some statistics about mobile gamers, partially because of the vague definition of casual. We usually just stick with either Facebook games or mobile games. Most mobile games tend to fit into our casual spectrum, so we can use them as a good example. You can see that in North America, it's a rough 50-50 split. In Europe and even Japan, doesn't break into the past that range of being close to 50-50. So the gender divide in a mobile space is pretty close. So it's unusual to see wildly 80-20 splits in gender when you're looking at an audience for a casual game, or most games in general are actually more evenly split than most people perceive. And the same is true for age. There is a good mix, but you'll actually see that in all of the territories, the largest age bracket that's playing mobile games are 20 to 35, which are fairly young people. So it's not like grandma's playing solitaire, everyone's playing solitaire. And another one is that, a little bit about what kinds of people are playing games. For Candy Crush, you can see that 41% are men, and that varies based on which piece of data you're looking at, but it's not wildly far off. But another one I think is really interesting is that 78% of Candy Crush players also play console games. Yes, I'm sure some of them are just playing Wii Sports, but it's still indicative. And if you look around, you're not just seeing grandma playing Candy Crush. Lots of people play Candy Crush. Our art director sent me this picture yesterday. The guy saw the train, playing Candy Crush, what? So they're pretty much for everyone. So then the question is, how do you design something for everyone? And the answer is, as a game designer, that I am a wizard. It's not really actually impossible or require any kind of wizardry. It's quite possible. A lot of things are designed for most people to use. Google.com is a thing that is required for most people to be able to use. Mazes, coloring books, tea kettles, keyboards, Facebook, Microsoft Office, most people can use. And that requires a lot of just common sense. I built this, people won't be able to use this. And it's about also, things like playtesting and realizing kind of you have to drop some of your perceptions of what you expect people to know. And I'm going to talk about that a little more. So to make games for everyone, we talk a lot about usability and user experience design. We talk about the simplicity of the game and how we teach it. We talk about what conventions we can expect people to already understand and what they won't understand. And we keep it casual in terms of session length and user experience, and we work on the first impression. So for usability, is just what makes people want to use something. And a really great example I always like when talking about good usability versus bad usability is two particular search engines. One of them is Google. It is a very successful search engine, not just because of its search results, but because its history has this design that's really simple and easy to use. I want to search for something. The main thing on the page is the search box. Versus something like another search engine called Bing, don't tell Microsoft that I can criticize this because we totally work with Microsoft, which has the search boxes, it's off to the side, it doesn't say search anywhere, there's no search button, there's a magnifying glass, which I guess means search, but meanwhile they had, in this particular day that I took this screenshot, also just a very questionable background choice as well, and that's not there every day, but it happened on the day that I took this picture. So that's, usability is going to contribute to the success of any game, really, but especially when you're designing something that's going to be for such a broad audience, it's the most important thing. If you're designing a first-person shooter that's not super usable, if your people want to play your game, they're going to suck it up and learn to use it, especially if they've already bought it. And that's not necessarily true in casual games. Another thing that's really helpful is the simplicity of the game itself, and that's part of the definition of casual game, thankfully, so it's easier to teach. But we also use that in other ways. If you look at the logos, for example, of two games, which I'm going to use in another example right after this, you can see that it's part of the design of the game, the look and feel of it. The World of Warcraft logo is intricate, it's elaborate, it implies that this is a big, elaborate game that's going to be a big investment to play. Whereas Bejeweled is, it's light, it's sparkly, it looks friendly. So that, it leads you to an awareness of their accessibility just by looking at them. Another thing about them is just the overall complexity of the game. On one hand, you have WoWWiki, which is like tons and tons of links of the jillion things you can learn about playing WoW. On the other hand, the Bejeweled Wiki is, get your Zen on. It's pretty chill. So thankfully, that makes designing casual games more easy. Another thing that's important are conventions, just what people know and don't know. And I'm going to refer to a story about this girl I knew in college. Her name was Amy. She was really smart, but she wasn't a gamer. And I wanted my DS to play New Super Mario Brothers, and I thought the game was pretty easy to pick up and play. And the first thing she does is run into the Goomba. And she's like, I died, Heather, I died. And I'm like, well, you ran into the bad guy. She's like, how do I know it's a bad guy? I'm like, bad guy? Doesn't he look like a bad guy? And then she's like, well, how do I get rid of him? You jump on his head. And she's like, wait, I thought if I touched him, I died. Well, no, you can jump on it. And she stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. And it's because she has no frame of reference for this. If you play platformers and you tell someone to jump on something head to kill it, then that makes sense. You're in an environment where you have all these conventions. You avoid running into things, touching things hurts you, but if you touch them from certain angles, it doesn't hurt you. And the thing about it is actually, even though we think about Mario in a casual game sense when you're talking about versus something like Call of Duty, Mario's actually not super accessible. Learning how to play that game if you have no frame of reference is actually fairly difficult. Not impossible, but fairly difficult. And that's, again, due to the conventions it relies on. But there are conventions we can rely on that are more common. We use familiar icons that are super recognizable. We use color. The color of stop signs internationally used this way. We use color. I spelled it differently so I'd remember that they're two different things. To also indicate that two things are not the same. That, a red shirt and a blue shirt in real life are basically the same thing. But in a game, they're not. Like, red and blue tiles are not part of the same group, and people can understand that really basically. So that's a convention that we're using. Another one is gravity or physics. Pieces fall down. When they fall up, it's mind-blowing. Things being round are usually friendly. Things that are sharp are not, often. And what a button looks like is also pretty recognizable. And you can actually see most of these conventions we're actually using. This is Match and Merge, which is a game that just came out on Android that you should totally play because it's awesome. It's one of ours. But you can see that we use different colors. We use the sharp edges. We're using things that look like you want to touch them and things that don't. And this is a random level I totally picked. And it's totally met most of these conventions. So that's pretty cool. Another thing besides keeping to conventions is remembering to keep the game casual. And that applies to the other definition of casual, the casual gamer. They're playing it on and off. They're not sitting down and planning to play it all night with their headset on and their Mountain Dew next to them with all their buddies all playing online with them or whatever. They're not doing that. Your casual gamer is probably gaming like this. This stock art of a guy on the iPad in the bathroom was used at GDC 2 years ago in every presentation about session length. So it's basically an awareness of even if you're not designing for mobile, your users for a casual gamer are generally not going to be playing it for hours. They're doing it. They're stopping for a game of solitaire to mentally relax between checking their emails and switching to a spreadsheet at work or something. So you have to design for these short experiences, things that can go in and out. Yes, people can play it for hours, but they have to be able to pick it up and put it down. So designing short sessions, we don't make the game as hard. We're designing a jigsaw game right now. Normally a hard jigsaw puzzle is 1,000 pieces and it's going to take you days. But for a 5-minute session, a 60-piece jigsaw puzzle is hard. And so we're designing it to keep it short. You limit moves and you limit time. This is an in and out experience. we break it up into short levels, and that's how something like, a saga game like Candy Crush is able to have tons and tons of content in these little bite-sized pieces. You have the ability to play the game, pause the game, resume the game later, resume the game on a different device. Those things make it a lot more convenient on mobile. And a lot of things on mobile autosave. And you also have systems like hearts and energy. So hearts and energy are really almost the same thing. They basically, in hearts, after you lose a certain number of times, you've run out of lives. The concept of running out of lives is not too foreign if you play games. And you either have to wait, or you have to ask friends, or you have to pay for more. Energy works similarly, but it actually takes it even if you don't lose. So every time you play, regardless if you win or lose, you get energy. And hearts aren't that terrible. If you play really well, you're not going to lose lives, just like any game. But, they get a little stigma. But the fact is, the games with them actually perform better, and I think give the player a better user experience. They increase retention over time, and the reason for that is because it leaves the player wanting more. So instead of ending your session feeling like, oh, I cannot play this game anymore, I've just been playing this for 2 hours, I am done, they feel like, oh, I wish I could play one more time. And that's a better feeling than, ugh, I'm done. So you don't want the players to feel burned out in your game. You don't want them to feel like they just ate like 7 chocolate cakes and they love chocolate cake, but after you eat 7 chocolate cakes, first of all, wow, but second of all, you're probably not going to want to eat chocolate cake for a while. So it's actually not terrible to put this in, and it's not just about monetization, even though it's great for monetization and or virality, which are important. So the next thing is first impressions. And that's really important for usability, because so people will understand how to play your game, and because the game is probably a free-to-play game, and if they don't have a good first impression, you're not going to keep them around long enough to spend any money. So if you want them at least 30 minutes into the game, you've got to make sure they can last 5 minutes, and if you're going to last 5 minutes, you want to make sure they know how to play the game. George Fan, who's a game designer for Plants vs. Zombies, gave a great talk at GDC, and I'm going to steal a little bit from him, because it was awesome. So he talks about tutorials being blended into the game. And that's like really basic. You don't want to feel like this separate experience. You don't want pages of text. That's like nobody's going to read pages of text, especially not in a casual game. People aren't playing because they want to read. The player has to be able to do things. They can't, they're not going to watch a video of it. They have to actively do it. It has to be responsive and reactive. So if the player did something right, you don't need to teach them how to do it. They already figured it out. But if the player didn't get it, it's good to give feedback on what they could have done instead, or how to do it. And that means that if someone is already getting the game, it's easier for them to get through it. And we always try to make tutorials react to the player. It's just fairly time-consuming to do. And once they're done with the tutorial, they don't need more explanation. And then I go back from the Plants vs. Zombies example, and this is the help screen for that game, where there's no actual help in the game because the experience of starting the game was sufficient in and of itself. And one thing about it is we don't actually call it a tutorial. We call it a first user experience, or an FUE, because it's not supposed to be this isolated thing. It's about just how the player learns to play. So when we introduce a mechanic, even if it's like 150 levels in the game, the first level that it's occurring on, that's the FUE for that mechanic. And that's, preferably not going to be, whoa, stop playing, even though you've been playing for a while and you already know how to play. Here's how something new works. It's ideally, I've designed this piece of the game in a way that you'll understand it by playing it. And while I do this is in a bunch of our games. If you haven't played Match Emerge, I could also say that it's in other games that you don't usually see tutorials late in the game. You see, just a level that's designed in a way that teaches you to do it. So once you have the player in the game, next thing you want to worry about is how games make money, because eating is good. And if you're going to be in the game industry, you probably want to make money. So there's 4 basic ways that pretty much every game makes money. The first is it's a premium game. You make the game, you sell the game, the player has the game, and they're done. A really easy transaction. It's just like buying a sweater. Then there's branding, or advergaming. Usually, it's when somebody pays you to do something for the game, which is really handy if that means you don't have to worry about selling it or monetizing the game, but you do have to worry about whoever paid you to brand the game, whatever they want. So it's good and bad, and it's less common, but it's actually not too, it's slightly more common in casual games to see branded games. Like, we reskin our games all the time for clients, to fit promotions and stuff. And that's, how branding works. Then there's advertising, which is super common and we all know a lot about. But the one you really want to do is microtransactions. So, real quick, ads are commercials in games. And if your game is huge and has really short sessions with lots of interstitial ads, or it's going to be a ton of people are playing it, you can make a ton of money. Flappy Bird, for example, is making $50,000 a day on ads, which is really good for a game like Flappy Bird. But you're only really going to make good money on ads if your game is huge, and if it suits it. So Flappy Bird had these like 2-second sessions. You'd play, you'd lose, you'd see an ad, and you'd be done. But it didn't feel weird because that wasn't a comfortable place in the session to see it. That's really hard to do. A lot of games are not going to make that much money in ads, and it's frequently difficult to rely on it. So we much prefer to rely on microtransactions. And a microtransaction can be a little bit of a misnomer because it's not always a microtransaction of 99 cents. It can be hundreds of dollars, but usually we like to think of them as the 99-cent ones. So what do people buy in games? They buy continues, more moves, they buy lives, power-ups and boosts, cosmetics and customizations, or additional content, often known as DLC. Those are the basic ones they buy. So, that seems like a lot of options of things I can sell to people. Well, here's the truth about free-to-play games. Less than 95% of your players are actually going to give you any money ever. Less than that. Which means most of your people are using your product and not giving you anything for it, and probably complaining that you're daring to ask. Spenders are divided up into usually 3 subsets, and the values of these subsets vary based on what company you're in. But these are rough examples, and of them, minnows, these are your low spenders who are spending $1 to $10 a month, or half of the people. So of that less than 5%, you have half of those are spending $1 a month. Then you have dolphins are another group, and I keep pointing the pointer at it, but that is on my screen and not yours. And whales, which are the last group, and they're a tiny one, but those are your big spenders. The thing about whales is these are 2 different graphs from 2 different companies making 2 different kinds of games. And in both cases, you can see that although the percentages vary because they're using not the same standards, what they consider whales, over $20 or over $100 either way, make up more than half of their revenue. Half of the revenue comes from a very small percentage of your users. And that's, it's rough because you still have to please all the other guys. They'll just trash you with reviews. They won't spread your game, but they're not the people that are spending money. So when it comes to monetization, you want to design it really well. David was really adorable and said that people enjoy shopping. We want that joy of shopping in our games, so we try to make it a good experience. But no matter what, there's going to be a stigma of charging in games. People are going to call free-to-play evil and manipulative. I have heard designers apologize for putting monetization in their games like they did something wrong. You shouldn't apologize for wanting to be paid for your work. There's no other industries that feel bad about wanting to be paid. So, fortunately, I don't, which is awesome. But anyway, you're going to get criticized for it anyway. You're going to get people who are mad at you that you dare to ask for 99 cents for a game that they've been playing for 6,000 hours. And you're going to get crappy reviews. And a lot of the thing about the reviews is they always like to claim that, that they're mean. One girl said, "I really wish y'all had less crappy versions so I could dislike you as humans less." Dark. But a lot of times they also ask for a paid version. Players are like, "Oh, I'd rather just pay for the game." The thing is, they don't. They say they do. And a lot of game developers also think, "Oh, I could just make a paid game." People bet then. People always say they will. So we had an example, and now we're not unique, but this is an example that we know for sure is true. A game that Twisty Hollow, that maybe you got to play. It was a critical hit. We got amazing reviews, and from players and from major publications. It was featured by Apple. It didn't return on the investment we put in it. We spent months on it. A lot of people worked on it. It's a gorgeous game that we're very proud of, but it didn't really make back what we put into it. And that's and you have to make a certain quality game to even convince people to pay for it. During our playtest, we had players who said that they would maybe pay 99 cents for it, but wouldn't pay $2.99 for it. The same playtesters paid $2.50 to take the subway to come to the playtest. So there are rare exceptions when you're making premium games. Some games are big hits. If you could make one of those, that'd be really cool. But it's really hard because people hate spending. This is an evil thing. It's not a new thing. Being asked to pay for games is old school, and the only reason that games like this are not still being criticized is usually because it's nostalgia, or it's the type of game, a game that used to be considered a hardcore game, and now we consider a casual game, or because you're serving beer with it in these fancy new arcade bar places. The other rough thing, it comes back to the stigma of casual games, and that free-to-play is really only evil in casual games. There are more core games that are also free-to-play that people criticize, but they criticize in a joking way, like, I can't believe I spent so much money, silly me. I love that game. They're certainly not evil for wanting to make money. And part of that is because of the way they monetize. They don't tend to use hearts. They don't tend to use things that people may criticize as pay to win. And part of it is because core games can monetize in different ways because their audience is more invested in the game. You can sell cosmetics in a game if your players are playing a lot and it's multiplayer and they're going to show up to other people. There's things you can only monetize in core games. So we can't always carry them back to casual games, unfortunately, because of the type of audience it is. So, in summary, a slide with my suggestions that you should be keeping it simple. If it's complicated, it's probably not going to be a casual game. It has to be accessible. Don't, expect your audience has played other things they may not have. Think about their conventions, what they already know. Make sure you're designing for short sessions and, have a first experience, design one. Make sure that you're teaching people how to play and you're not assuming they don't know, even though they probably do in some cases, which I think Dave is going to talk about really soon. And don't forget to monetize because you can't make games if you can't pay your electricity bill to charge your computer. So, and that was my part of the talk. And David's going to talk about our game development process at Arkadium.
Hey, everyone. I was just there for half an hour. Don't go back there, all right? It's really creepy. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about our game development process at Arkadium. In general, a lot of our processes are applicable to many other companies, but this is what we do and why I'm going to tell you why it works for us. So really the first step to making a game is really choosing the right game. We're a company that pumps out tons of games every year, so this is really the first thing that we have to take a look at. We have to choose the right game that would give us the best return on investment. So sometimes the game idea is really as simple as taking a classic game such as Crossword or Jigsaw and updating it for a modern audience. So usually when we go with these ideas, these are really driven by market opportunities and really how familiar we are with them. We've made tons of crossword games in the past. We've made tons of Jigsaw games. So making a new one for a new technology is just learning that new technology. We don't really have to answer many design questions. But we also make unique ideas, right? So really to come up with unique ideas, it's quite hard, right? We can't do it ourselves because we're just a few people. So what we try to do is we open up idea submissions to the entire company. We encourage all of our coworkers to submit ideas, and we really want to leverage everybody's different backgrounds, everybody's different skill sets, and that really gives us a unique perspective on these game ideas. So we've been doing this for a couple years now. We incentivize people to submit ideas. If their idea happens to make $100 million, they do get a significant portion of those profits. Right? So on the other, we're also trying to inspire all of our employees to come up with new ideas, because not all of our employees are necessarily game designers. They don't necessarily even play games. So we try our best to get everyone thinking about games constantly. So every week we have weekly brainstorm sessions where people can come in and they will help us solve a problem. They could just spout out any ideas they have, and this really gets people being in the creative mind. We also run classes every now and then. Some of these classes are classes, there are coworkers teaching each other skills, but sometimes we also bring in outside people to come to Arkadium to kind of give a class about anything. We've had classes about law, about astrology, about healthy eating. So any of these we hope to inspire someone to come up with some unique ideas. And this is my favorite. Every now and then we have game nights. We stay in the office, we play some video games, we play some board games, we even play paper prototypes that other employees bring in. So our idea behind all this is really to expose everyone to new game ideas and hopefully get them thinking about something cool. So this is another thing that I'm really excited about. Every year we run 1 or 2 game jams. So if you've never heard of a game jam before, it's like an event. At Arkadium, we close our company down for 2 days, and everyone is put onto a team to make games. So we've had people who've never made a game before, and they are, in these 2 days, they're participating in the game jam. They're contributing ideas, they're designing levels, they're trying their hand on programming or doing some art. So this really helps everyone, helps us leverage everybody's unique perspectives and come up with ideas that we probably wouldn't have come up with ourselves. So for example, that Twisty Hollow game that Heather mentioned before, that idea came out of a game jam, and this is how it looked like. That's 2 days of work. All right, so once you have an idea that you like, and you're ready to make the game, what's the next step? Well, maybe you want to start speccing out your entire game in a game design document, and that might work. It really depends on the game that you're trying to work on. If you're working on something like a crossword or a jigsaw, where the end result is very clear, then usually a game design document works really well in that case. But if you're working on this new game idea, and you have no idea how it's going to end, an upfront GDG is not the right solution. Because the reality is that where you think the fun is, that's usually not the case, right? It really takes a lot of iteration to really find the fun, and often you'll surprise yourself where the fun is actually. All right? So for us to find the fun, we make prototypes, right? So really prototypes, we make them really fast. It takes us about 2 or 3 days. It used to take us longer, but more recently we've been trying to reduce that time to make prototypes. And really prototypes really help us to stay flexible and helps us identify any problems early. And really the most important thing is it helps us experiment. So remember that Twisty Hollow game jam idea? We took that idea and we made some prototypes. Really our main goal was to experiment, to find what we can do with that mechanic, to find how that mechanic gets more interesting in later levels. So we just made a ton of prototypes. So this is one of them. And really, an idea in a document is just a guest, but ideas that can be played really communicate much more. Right? All right, so you have your idea, you have a prototype, you have an idea that it's pretty good, so now it's time to start developing the game. So at Arkadium, we have very small teams, generally 3 to 5 people per team. We have very short deadlines, 2 to 3 months, sometimes even less. And we have tons of distractions. So as I mentioned before, we do some work for clients. So sometimes clients will come with us for requests. We work a lot with third-party technology. That's generally good, but it also means that sometimes those technologies break, and then we have to spend time trying to fix them. So really, to get a game done with such a small team and such a short deadline, the most important thing to us is really prioritizing. And the other thing is really getting the team aligned. So how do we do that? So at the start of the project, we have something called the kickoff meeting. Right? The purpose of this meeting is really to get everyone on the same page. Right? So really the most important thing that comes out of this meeting is really defining the goal of the project. And that is going to trickle down and affect all the game design decisions. So for example, we're working on a jigsaw game. If the goal of the jigsaw game was to make the best jigsaw game ever, that would really inform a lot of the decisions that we would make, right? So that would mean we need to be fully featured. Maybe we need to upload your own photos and share it with your friends and so on. But in our case, our goal was to make a jigsaw game really fast, right? So really that really helps us cut scope and really think about what features are essential, what features aren't necessary, and really what is the MVP of the project. MVP is minimal viable product. Oh, you're welcome. The other thing to define is the pillars of the game. So the pillars are very similar to the goals of the project. They're kind of just broken down further. So they're like a set of points that really lay out the foundation for your game. So I'll just show you the pillars that we had for Twisty Hollow, which at that time was called Circle Town. Right? So these are some of the pillars that we defined for the game, right? We wanted randomness to be a big factor of the game. We wanted upgradable elements. Discovery was very important, increasing complexity over time. So this really sets a frame for all the game design decisions. So as we're adding new mechanics, we want to make sure these mechanics are adding randomness. They are, humorous. So like for example, we had a brainstorm where someone suggested to make puzzle levels that are handcrafted and they have one solution. So I mean, while that is a great idea, it doesn't really fit into the pillars of the game because it doesn't have that randomness that we wanted in this game. All right, so back to this. So what else do we talk about at the kickoff meeting? We talk about, the core mechanics. So the core mechanics are really, we want to answer the questions of like, how does the game play? How does the game get more interesting as you play more? And what new mechanics can we add to the game that make the later levels interesting? What are some goals, some different obstacles? What are some power-ups we could introduce? We also discuss meta mechanics. These are the things that Heather talked about, like how can we retain users and keep them coming back for more? How can we make money off of the game? How can we get players to share the game and get other people into the game? And we also discuss things like what is the theme of the game, what is the overall art, and how are we going to market the game? So it's really important that these are just discussion topics. They aren't defining the meta mechanics or defining the core mechanics, because at this stage of the project, we don't know how those are going to end up, right? But we do want everyone to start discussing and thinking about it. And finally, we set a timeline for the project, which for us, in most cases, it's like 2 or 3 months. So right after the kickoff meeting, we start making the game, and we follow something called Scrum. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. It's a software development framework that's popularly used in many game companies. So I'll just go over like a quick basis of what Scrum is. So it really starts with the backlog. This is a list of everything that needs to be done, and this list is always changing. Things are being added to the list, things are being removed from the list. But basically, this is one singular list that keeps track of everything that needs to be done for the game to be successful. So at the start of a sprint is basically like a 2-week development schedule. So at the start of the sprint, the product owner defines what the goal of the sprint is, right? So maybe for the first sprint, the goal is to make a working game. In the second sprint, maybe it's to implement art and sounds. And then maybe later on in the other sprints, it would be to implement monetization. So once the product owner defines the goal, the team really commits to the task. They start pulling out tasks from the backlog that would help the game get towards achieving these goals. Right? And after sprint planning, we move into development where we make the game. And every day we have a stand-up where everybody literally stands up around in a circle and we talk about what we did yesterday, what we were planning to do today. And really the most important thing about the stand-up is identifying blockers. Maybe you're saying, I can't do this task because Art hasn't given me art yet. So then we identify impediments and then we try to remove them as soon as possible. And at the end of the 2 weeks, there's a sprint review. So at this point, we have a demo of the game. We show it to the entire company. Everyone comes in, they play it, they give us feedback, they give us criticisms, and good and bad. And then all that feedback just goes right back into the backlog, and this cycle repeats. Eventually, after a couple of sprints, we launch the game, and after we launch the game, we have a postmortem. And the most important thing about the postmortem, it's just a meeting where we talk about everything that went well, everything that went wrong. And the most important thing is really talking about what did we learn and how are we going to improve for the next project. All right, so at Arkadium, like I said, we have very short sprints. We have 2 weeks generally, sometimes 1 week. And we do this because, well, we are also a client-based company, so we need to be able to postpone working on a game, right? At the end of a sprint, we should have a build that should be able to stop. We're not like stopping in the middle of something. So we have a good stopping point. So sometimes we need to go and respond to some client work. And also, generally, we want to receive and respond to feedback as soon as possible. So here's a good example. This is how that game Circle Town looked like. And after we had some sprint reviews, people looked at it. They weren't very excited about it, and then that's when we decided to pivot, and we completely changed the game to that. And that's what is out now in the stores. So some other tricks that we use or tips. It really helps to visualize progress. So here we're using something called Trello, which is like a digital whiteboard, but we're also using like physical Post-it notes on a physical whiteboard. So visualizing progress really helps the team see the priorities. It's really easy to see what is the most important task, what's the most important project, and really tackle them based on priorities. And finally, playtesting. Playtesting is super important. We playtest our games almost every sprint. So mostly this is done by just grabbing a coworker and say, hey, what are you doing? You don't need to send that email. Come and play our games. But sometimes we also go to local events like some play crafting demo nights, or even like the Sheep's Meow events that Brian and GJ holds. We go there to get the game in front of people and we watch them play. And really, playtesting really helps us identify any early UI or UX problems. It really helps us identify what players want to do or what they expect to do. And then we go back and we add those feedback into our backlog and we improve our game. Okay. Finally, that's our process in a nutshell. But it's not all roses. It's not perfect. We're still constantly learning and we're still constantly improving. So here are some of the challenges that we run into. We are a cross-platform company. We make games for pretty much every platform out there except for consoles. But that also means we have lots and lots of edge cases to deal with, which is very tough on us. We usually wait to the very end to build our tutorials. Generally, this is a smart decision because we need to finish the game first because how can we teach the game if there is no game? And B, as we are constantly developing the game, we learn more about the game, and the best time to teach the game is when you are fully familiar with what the game offers. But usually, sometimes we don't even get to building the tutorial because we save it for the very end and then we run out of time. Heather doesn't really like that. We have very short timelines for our projects, but that also means we have very little time for playtesting. And finally, since we are working on many projects at once, we have to often juggle them. A lot of projects come back from the grave. We release them, we think we're over, and then they come back with new requests, or we just find some bugs and we just have to go back and fix them. So these are some of the challenges that we face. And we're constantly trying to improve ourselves and solve all of these. So that's it. Finally, since most of you are college students, we are hiring interns every semester in these following departments. So if you're interested, check out our website. That's it.
The first question that comes to mind, you mentioned the kickoff meeting where you define goals of the project, the pillars of the project, and so on. Could you talk a little more about how this is done? The people in this kickoff meeting are exactly the same people working on the game, or how do you get consensus? Do you get marketing people or business people in there?
It depends on the game. For example, we are working on Jigsaw now, and the kickoff meeting included account managers. We call them partnership development managers, PDMs, because one of the goals of the game that we knew about going into making it was that it was going to have to deal a lot with client work and what our existing clients would want to customize about the game. So we included them in the meeting, and with different meetings we include different people depending on that. But it's a lot of times because we do a lot of client work, it's informed by some business goal of the company besides make fun game, which is the intrinsic goal of all games.
And usually it's our director who helps us come up with the goal because he has like an overall view of the project. We're so like in the trenches that sometimes it's hard to kind of take a step back and look at the overall picture. So like the goals are really helped us, defined by the director.
Or I decide, because I'm bossy.
So I guess when working in teams, it's kind of important to, so I guess it's a curiosity about the team dynamics. For example, both of you have backgrounds in computer science, but one focuses more on design while the other focuses more on development. So how important is it that as like a game designer, you have some experience in programming or how art works, and that as a programmer, and like the importance of kind of being well-rounded in that aspect?
I would say that everybody is a game designer in some way. There was a little bit of a recent thing happened. Half-Brick, which is a company that makes Jetpack Joyride, laid off some game designers, not because they weren't doing a great job, it was because they wanted not to have dedicated game designers, and they wanted the team to be very involved in the process. And I, as a game designer, I do feel like everybody is a game designer, and we use different principles and expect everybody to have some, feeling on how stuff works. But it's also, it's good to have dedicated people who, when it's time to actually not make decisions but just carry them out, you probably want your artists to be making art and you want your program to be programming. But when it comes to, building games in general, you're going to have to work together and integrate all your stuff. So for me, I have a computer science degree and a development degree. So usually when I'm designing things, I know ahead of time to tell a programmer, one, I have an idea of whether or not they're going to be able to implement it and what's impossible and not. And also to be able to say, hey, later on I might change my mind about this, so make sure you program it flexible. So, because I know that which kinds of things are going to be a pain in the butt to change and which aren't. And the same holds true for art. Like, I might change the color of that. Don't design it like that. So I know how to use, also have a little bit of background in asset development. And I think all of us are a little multidisciplinary. And I definitely expect all of us to contribute to it. We work very closely together in that manner. So having a well-rounded background is like super important.
I went to school for programming, so I'm a little bit biased towards it. But I do think it's like really helpful because even if you're a game designer and you're not programming every day, it really helps you communicate with the programmers, and it really helps you get more accurate estimates on how big a task is. And that's one of the key things about Scrum. It's about really being able to estimate accurately, so you know how long a project will take.
You mentioned, both of you, that conducting playtests are a really important part of your process. And you've also mentioned that having an FUE, first user experience, is also really important. So how do you work playtesting into designing things as important as the FUE or tutorials? Do you prototype a hypothesis and then test it for things like retention and monetization, or how does it go?
It varies. So when teaching game mechanics, one of the other reasons that we leave it towards the end is because it usually requires us to watch playtests and see what people do and don't understand. So we can come into a playtest with like a rough hypothesis of how it works, and then see what people do and don't get. And because we're actually in the room, we can then help them so they can test other things after that. But just watching someone play is incredibly important, because some things we take for granted the player may not. Like my friend from college didn't get it. So that's how we usually do playtesting for mechanics and FUE. And depending on the game, we may spend a really long time in it. Imago, which has been on hold, but we have shown several times, is incredibly complicated FUE that we spend a really long time on. When it comes to things like retention and monetization, David used to be on our prototyping team, which is why I think he's a great designer too. You can talk a little bit more about that one.
Here's the thing, like I've made so many games, like over 100 games. That means I've made over 100 tutorials and FUEs. I always think I'm learning something from the previous game and I'm going to apply to the new game. I'm always wrong, right? Every FUE that we've designed, it's never perfect the first time. So for us, it's super important to always get in front of people who don't play games or people who've never seen the game, and really just to see how they play it.
What about how we test monetization and retention?
This is true of our older process. We don't really do it so much anymore. But previously, we used to have a research and development team, which I was a part of. We would make these prototypes. We would make them seem like real games, and then we would publish them under a sub-label, not Arkadium. So we treat them like real games. We have monetization in them. Basically, for us, like the real test is to treat it like a real game, even though we've only spent 2 weeks on it. That's how we got like some preliminary data, some preliminary monetization, just to get us an idea of how the real game would be. We don't do that anymore.
Also talking about working in teams, I imagine, I guess anybody who's worked in a group, they encounter conflict within a group. How do you guys handle conflict?
I talk really loudly and stomp my feet a lot. No, well, usually we try to compromise. We actually had a conflict today, which is not super common to have like really butt heads. Usually, one person is like, all right, I don't feel super strongly about this, and if I don't feel super strongly about this, maybe it's not as important. Just like any conflict is, you decide what's important to fight on. And then sometimes if it's just, I think it's right, and for example, I wanted something on a pause screen today, arranged a certain way. And our artists also have a lot of user experience and UI design background too, so they also are qualified to have an opinion on it, obviously, and disagree with me. So at the end, we turned to our mutual manager and asked him to make a call, and he doesn't play favorites. So it's usually it's good to have just someone else who you trust to make decisions. Thankfully, I think David and I both really trust our managers and the people that are leading us. So that usually is like, oh, I know that they're the kind of people who, if they're not sure, they'll ask us, or they won't insist on something just because they want it their way. It's not a power struggle. It's usually about what's right. So don't try to play politics. Don't make it a power struggle. Be okay saying, all right, we'll do it your way. But just know how to stand your ground when you know something is really important.
I think trust is really important. I trust Heather on her game design decisions. She trusts me on programming decisions. So,
I trust you on design decisions too.
oh, thank you. So, we have a lot of trust. We are a very small team, so we know each other very well. So that really helps us not get into conflicts too much. But whenever we do, we kind of just turn to our product owner of the project, and he's the final arbiter of the decision.
Which is very awkward for me. But also, we do know each other very well. So David and I hang out outside of work a lot too. And he has this face that he makes whenever he is doubting something or not quite agreeing it and is not going to say something. And I know that, oh God, if I see that face, I have to get him to tell me what's wrong. And so just, know your team and be willing to do bonding stuff, even if it's corny.
We have a bunch of questions on Twitter. Here's one from Michael Murphy. Are pay-to-win games good to create, like to design a game directly for it?
It depends. If you're making a more core title, the core audience tends to be less receptive to it. So, and in general, also the free-to-play audience may be less receptive to it. For example, if I tell someone, oh, I'm on level 400 of Candy Crush, oh, how much did you pay to get there? Think about it this way, though. There are old arcade games that do it. If you lose, you could put more quarters in, you can keep playing. And if you keep putting enough quarters in, you can get to the top of the leaderboards. And usually they actually don't get hated on that much. So the basic answer is it really depends on what the game is and if it's a competitive game. Generally, if it's a competitive game, probably don't do it. But if it's a social game or a more casual game, you can usually get away with it. It's going to depend on the target audience. So for example, in Imago, if anybody got a chance to play it at one of the events we showed it at, it does have monetization that lets you buy more moves, and more moves will let you get a higher score. And we knew that was important to the monetization of the game, but we also knew that it was a very skill-based game, and people were going to care about, feeling that they got a high score by skill, and they didn't just buy it. So it's actually, at the end of the game, it's a strategic decision, because we only let you do it once. So you're making a strategic decision, oh, should I buy one move or two moves? How many moves are actually valuable to me? And is my score high enough that one more move is even worth paying for? So you're also letting someone make a strategic decision about whether or not it's worth buying. And at times it also may make the purchaser feel smarter, like they made a good decision. Oh, I bought now and not at a different time. So in general, yes, it depends.
No comment.
There's a lot of questions about internships, maybe.
Yeah, we can talk in general about internships.
Okay, great. So what would an intern, what kind of skills or experiences do you look for an intern to start off?
Usually basically good people skills always help, dress nicely for your interview, show up on time, answer emails, those basic ones are good. A cover letter that's not addressed to the wrong company or any company is also good. I like a really good cover letter, but not everybody feels that way. And, good for design, I look for writing skills. Because you're going to be doing a lot of writing, I would say that the main two tools I use as a game designer are Word and Excel. And so knowing how to use those. And also just being able to communicate concisely about game mechanics. So for me, I give out a design test that's going to test your ability to write documentation. don't let anyone tell you that documentation is not important, because it is so important. And, just, general experience, like if you're in a program, it just depends. Sometimes it's just, getting a little more experience in programs. Make games, have games in your portfolio, have games of different sizes, so have like a tiny little game or have like a grand scope game. Don't limit yourself to being, oh, I'm gonna be a narrative designer, and all my games are gonna be these giant, interactive narrative experiences that I'm probably never gonna see made. Because at Arkadium, we make casual games, so that's not as helpful. So just, be diverse and show even if you wanna do one thing, show you can do other things.
I'm in charge of the programming intern, so I can talk a little bit more about that. So the number one thing that I always look for is an online portfolio. So that's the first thing I look for. I go to it, and I just want to see some projects that we worked on, and hopefully even play them. So the easier it is for me to see that, the better. So, have a YouTube video, have an animated GIF, have an easy download link where I can just get the game running and playing, and that really makes me happy. So for the game programming internship, there's kind of two parts to it. One is to be able to do some client work. So we have a lot of some work. Like, we have a lot of requests to update a very old game, to add like maybe a new reskin, to add new art. So for me, like, a really important skill set is the ability to adapt and to learn languages really fast. Because some of our old games are in ActionScript 1 or ActionScript 2. Sometimes it's in Unity, sometimes it's in HTML5. So I don't expect you to know all of those things, but if you have the ability to pick it up within a day and just start working on it, that's really important. And the other half of the internship is making prototypes. So if you've ever participated in a game jam before, or something to that liking, you are able to develop games really fast. That's the other skill set that I look for.
Definitely go to game jams, and like if you go to events, like I think you can put those on your resume, especially if you're a student and you don't have a ton of job experience. Well, what other experience did you have that is relevant? Or did you do you volunteer at game-related stuff? Do you play competitively? Even that is, well, you're involved. So you could even, for me, you can put what level Candy Crush you're in. So that's cool. Oh, and actually play casual games. That's like super important. Sometimes, yeah, just if you're playing Candy Crush, like I go to Candy Crush because they made a lot of money from it and they have a big team researching stuff. So it's a good one to get like your teeth wet in, and it's got the most penetration. But you can also play ours. I mean, Max Emerge is a really good game. So yeah, it's on Android. Download it now.
We have another question on Twitter from Jay Boucher. Are casual games a good fit as cross-platform HTML5 browser games, or perhaps better as mobile apps?
Both. They are good everywhere, all the time. Casual games are the best. No, we actually do. We make them for all of those platforms. We do web. We do mostly HTML5 right now because it is the most cross-platform. So we adapt, we wrap it and put it on mobile. We put it on desktop, and we put it on mobile web. So, yeah. David agrees.
Another last question from Twitter? Okay, last question from Twitter. This is from Tarek Leon. How can designers avoid getting stuck into quote-unquote development hell and avoid conceptualizing the game forever?
Not quite sure what that first phrase meant, but having goals really helps. So knowing what your end product was. So for Jigsaw, it wasn't just to make a Jigsaw game really fast. That was a paraphrasing of it. It was to make a Jigsaw game fast that wasn't trying to compete with all the other games in the mobile space. So the main thing is concentrate on your core mechanics. Have like an MVP. So the game is not fun if core mechanics aren't fun. So for example, in Mario, running and jumping are fun. If that's not fun, it doesn't matter what the hell else you put in the game, that's the main thing you need to do. And if that's fun, then you can just add a little bit, and then if that's fun, you can go. And then you can just add a little bit, and that's fun if you go. If you keep adding features, it's possible your games can just get ridiculously fun, but more likely than not, you're going to run out of time. So have a deadline, stick to it, get your core mechanics done first. Figure out what they are and get them developed. You do not need to write an entire GDD for a game before you start development. A documentation is the output of is the primary output of a game designer, or systems designer, not necessarily a level designer. So when a programmer is working in one sprint on a feature for a game, you are in design mode for the next sprint that they're going to develop, and you could build the documentation for that. And eventually, you will run out of time, and you can stop adding features. But hopefully, every feature you added contributed to your core mechanics being fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's really easy when you're a business because we have things called deadlines and budgets, right? So it's really easy to see like how much work you need to put in before you start getting diminishing returns, right? You could work on a project forever, but it's probably going to end up making the same amount of money. So really, there's a point where those two lines cross, and that's the perfect stopping point.
So even if you're working on your own project, set your own deadlines. Like, oh, I'm going to work on this for this long, and if I can't figure it out in this much time, maybe there's not an answer, or maybe the game's not fun. Maybe I had a cool idea and it didn't pan out. That happens. Never to me, but it happens.
I guess last question. I guess. To kind of close off the evening, we have a lot of aspiring game designers, artists, and programmers in the audience tonight, who are all creating their own games right now. So last bits of advice that you'd like to share to them.
Keep your documentation and include it in your portfolio. That one's for me. I'll probably think of more later, but I'll be around.
Go to game jams. Make as many games as you can. Game jams are the perfect place to do that because you get to meet people, you get to learn stuff, and like even if you don't end up making a game, the worst you can lose is 2 days. You know, the reward it's so far outweigh the risks. So go to more game jams. Constantly be learning. It's easy to say that when you're like in college, but when you're out of college, you know, constantly be learning, pick up books, go on the internet, you know.
Go on the right parts of the internet. Not all of the internet is for learning. But I definitely, like, that's, David's like, right, you make a lot of games. Don't make your portfolio be just these two magnum opus, or one magnum opus that you think is gonna be this genius game. And I see a lot of portfolios like that, and a lot of aspiring developers do that. First of all, if that one's actually not good and you just think it's good, that doesn't look good. But second of all, you need to get more experience. I love the fact that I'm the only game designer, and we make a butt ton of games, a metric butt ton, if you will, and I get to work on a lot of different things, and it's amazing because you never stop learning. So yes, always be making something and writing it down and showing it off in your portfolio.
I think that's a great note to end it on. David and Heather, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Can we give them another round of applause? So over in Westminster Hall, which is next door, there should be a reception with some refreshments being set up. Please make your way over there. Thank you all for coming out tonight.